What's good, Raider Nation? It's your boy Sanjit back at it with another video. The Raiders have officially locked in their head coach. I shouldn't say officially because technically it's not official, but um, we we got some news coming out here, man. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I am so damn excited. I was enjoying my Sunday morning, just relaxing. And of course, I'm checking social media because I had a feeling this could potentially come. And here we are, man. It is official. And I want to just go through the reports really quickly just to start the video. And then we'll obviously get into some comments. But you guys obviously see this here. Source, Miss Adam Shep putting this out there. Source, after meeting Saturday with Las Vegas and Arizona, the Seahawks offensive coordinator Klint Kubiak intends to work out a deal to become the next head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. This is what Adam Schefter put out. He put a couple other things out there as well, which I'll just go over really quickly. Schefter also said no deal can be finalized until after the Super Bowl, but Klint Kubiak wants to coach the Raiders, and they want him to be their they want them to be their head coach. Now, it's only a matter of time until the two sides can formalize the deal. And then finally, one other thing that he kind of put out there. With the Raiders locating their coach, Arizona Cardinals now will shift focus. I guess it's not related to the Raiders. But there it is, right? There it is. So obviously, we're at the point where Klint Kubiak wants to be the Las Vegas Raiders head coach, vice versa. The Raiders want Klint Kubiak. And I see some of your guys' comments. We were in a situation last year as well where, or was it 2 years ago, where Cliff Kingsbury, we had a agreement with him, and I believe it was for him to become our offensive coordinator, and he backs out, and I think we get stuck with Luke Getzey. I believe who it was at that point. This one's different, right? This just feels different. Kubiak wants to be a head coach, but wait it out because if he was going to wait it out for a better opportunity, he would have taken the Buffalo Bills job. To me, this just seems like one of those situations where we're in a situation where Klint Kubiak is in the Super Bowl, so he can't actually sign a contract right now. So he can only agree to becoming a head coach for this next team. I don't I don't think this guy's not going to become a head coach at this point. I think the fact that he's already kind of confirmed with the Raiders have already kind of made it known that we want you. There's just not a lot of coaches even left at this point, right? Um, Also, there's two other things that I want to just kind of show you guys really quickly. Two things specifically. These came out like yesterday and even the night before. But this is kind of when we started to get some insight into the meeting. Now, we knew the meeting was supposed to happen Saturday. We already knew that. The one thing we did not know was where this meeting will happen, right? Will the meeting happen uh in will the meeting happen in Vegas? Will the meeting happen in Seattle or somewhere else? Dan Veens actually put this out there. This guy covers the Seahawks. If you guys don't know, he has his own YouTube channel, does a really good job covering the Seahawks. He said he got a text from a former coworker just now. Klint Kubiak was dining with Mark Davis. This was Friday night specifically, right? And he said it was at my old restaurant. So much for meeting on Saturday. So Dan puts this out there. He's basically saying that, hey, there's a coworker that he worked with, someone that obviously knows, Dan creates content now at this point. But this was a restaurant that Dan used to work at. It was a steakhouse specifically in Seattle. And Dan is basically saying that, hey, Klint Kubiak and Mark Davis had a dinner at this steakhouse, right, at his old restaurant. And then this was Friday night. You can see down here. There's the name of the steakhouse. The following day, I'm gonna go ahead and share this next one. Mark Davis once again met with Klint Kubiak, and according to this guy, Ryder Wise, who kind of took this picture and he put some things out himself. He said that John Spytek was there. He said Tom Brady was there. And he said that they were all in like a private suite or some sort of suite or some sort of, something to that tune. And at some point, Mark Davis and Klint Kubiak started walking around. There was a convention going on. So they're walking around the convention. Ryder says that's when he kind of noticed those two walking around. And then they eventually went, sat down, and, they started eating and having drinks or whatever here. But you guys can tell, right? Obviously, it's Mark Davis, and then with him is Klint Kubiak. So Mark Davis met with Klint Kubiak 2 straight days. And again, today, Sunday morning, right after the last 2 days in Seattle, these meetings that were happening, Kubiak's here, man. Kubiak is officially here. let's talk about this, man. I'm so excited to just kind of see how this works out for the Raiders. I think the Raiders are in a really interesting situation because let me shut this down real quick. All right, let's get into your guys' comments too. So, I think the Raiders are in a really interesting situation because on one end, hiring guys like Antonio Pierce, hiring guys like Pete Carroll, hiring these type of coaches does not lead to Super Bowls. It doesn't lead to the Raiders actually having success. Given the fact that you're kind of hoping these guys are still what they once were, or you're hoping these guys end up being good coaches. But like with Antonio Pierce, for example, the guy didn't call plays on either offense or defense. With Pete Carroll, he didn't call plays on the defensive side. And the most success that Pete Carroll had, right, the Super Bowl he won, came when he had elite coaches on his coaching staff, guys like Dan Quinn, guys like Robert Saleh. That was the year that they had these dominant defenses and they essentially won these Super Bowls. Um, you think about some of the coaches the Raiders have brought in, right? Josh McDaniels, another coach the Raiders had brought in. Now McDaniels, who knows what he could have ended up being. He's obviously a great offense coordinator. He obviously did not work with the Raiders, and the Raiders got rid of him pretty quickly. And then on top of that, he obviously came back to the Patriots, and he's now in the Super Bowl as well, right? He's a good offensive coordinator. But it's different when you hire Klint Kubiak because Klint Kubiak is a great offensive corner, great play caller, and we've seen this now for 2 straight years. The Raiders now have a coach, at least on the offensive side, that's going to produce top 10 offenses. Pretty much every year going forward, the Raiders will have a top 10, at least from a scheme perspective, they'll have a top 10 scheme. Think about the Rams with Sean McVay. You think about the 49ers with Kyle Shanahan. You think about Ben Johnson with the Chicago Bears and even the Detroit Lions before that. You always know these offenses are going to be elite. And now the Raiders have that with a guy in Klint Kubiak. You have a guy that's going to run an elite offense. And I think for the Raiders is the best, absolute best situation you can be in. Klint Kubiak has officially agreed. Vice versa, the Raiders have agreed to Klint Kubiak. And it's kind of interesting because the reports are out there that the Raiders wanted Jesse Minter. And of course, the Ravens job came open and Minter took that job. And I'm so happy that that's how it ended up working out because I think Klint Kubiak's a better coach. I think he'll end up having more success for the Raiders. And at this point, we'll have to figure out on the defensive side which coach it's going to end up being. There's a bunch of good defensive coaches. I'm not too worried about the defense right now. I'm mostly worried about the offense. Mostly worried about getting that quarterback here. Let's get into it, man. I want to get into some of your guys' comments. Obviously, I'm very, very excited at this point. The Raiders, man, they're headed towards the Super Bowl at this point. These are the decisions that get you on that path. And I'm not saying we're going to win this year, but I can guarantee you guys in the next 10 years, the Raiders will be like, a game out of the Super Bowl multiple times. They'll be in the Super Bowl. Hopefully, they'll win a Super Bowl potentially as well. Who knows, right? But I can guarantee you guys the Raiders have a real shot at this point. We've not had a real shot in the last, how many ever years. Maybe under John Gruden, right, for 1 or 2 years, we may have had an opportunity. Never worked out. He ended up getting kind of kicked out of the NFL. Got a notification from Yahoo Sports a few minutes ago, and when I reloaded YouTube, Rent and Sanjit came on too. It's a feeling a little bit more like a done deal. Looking forward to February 9th. 100% of hear you on this one, man. And I know a lot of people are gonna relax a little bit and not get too excited until that contract gets signed. So I'm sure someone can look this up. How often do head coaches agree with teams and then they back out of it? How often does that happen? I don't know how often that happens, especially if you've already met the owner once or twice. At this point, I'm pretty confident the Raiders are going to end up hiring Klint Kubiak, and I'm pretty sure Clint's going to take the job. The only thing I could see end up happening in this situation is, even then, I think it's a very low chance, is if Klint Kubiak doesn't win the Super Bowl, maybe he feels like, hey, I want to go back and try winning with the Seahawks. But even then, like, I feel like it's kind of a shitty thing to back out of a job, right? That too, like, usually teams that have coaches available or positions available are teams that are bad, right? And obviously for the Raiders, we're in a good situation, which is why I think this just ends up working out where Klint Kubiak, the number one coach coming out, he wants to be with the Raiders, right? I'm excited, man. We see some super chats coming in. I hope I didn't miss any super chats. If I did, I apologize. Crispy Bandicoot says this has to be the franchise's biggest move in years. Might be a turning point, but if not, we're following the moves that good teams make. That's a fact, man. This comment just sums up everything that we have to recognize with this move right here. The best teams in the NFL right now have elite coaches, mostly on the offensive side, right? And the Raiders have that right now. We have an elite coach on the offensive side. We saw what this guy did in 1 year with the Seahawks. Remember, the Seahawks, they didn't make the playoffs last year. And 1 year later, they bring in Klint Kubiak and they make the playoffs. To me, coaching matters so much, especially on the offensive side. And again, I think this is the type of move that, from a franchise perspective, I've said this now for weeks. If you guys have watched my content, your coach on the offensive side, the play caller, matters more than your actual quarterback. It matters more than your defensive end. It matters more than your all-pro, tight end or whoever it is. The coach that you have matters way more than anything else. And we've seen coaches prove this over and over and over again. Sean McVay goes to the Super Bowl with Jared Goff. He goes to the Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford. Kyle Shanahan goes to the Super Bowl with Jimmy G, goes to the Super Bowl with Brock Purdy, right? These guys can just change out quarterbacks. They're still making it to the Super Bowl. If not, they're competing every single year. So, your coaches matter a lot. And, I think we're at the point with Klint Kubiak. He's a good coach, right? He's kind of proven that. Raider fans, please, for the love of God, you have to give Klint time. Too many fans cry and call for firings after one bad year. This is true too, right? This is 100% a fact. And, when Josh McDaniels got fired, I did not agree with it, right? Not that I thought Josh McDaniels was a great coach, right? He up to that point had made a lot of bad decisions. He was way too strict. He was trying to be Bill Belichick when he wasn't. That was on Josh, right? So it made sense for the Raiders to obviously fire him, but a lot of fans were also angry about it. And Mark Davis kind of panicked a little bit, and he made that decision. I hope, even if Klint Kubiak struggles for 1 or 2 years, I hope the Raiders fans don't start saying, get rid of this guy. Because, the 49ers for the longest time, like, their fans have been screaming, get rid of Kyle Shanahan. Fire Kyle Shanahan. He's a crappy coach. And, my brother-in-law is a Niners fan, and even last year, he was telling me the Niners need to fire Kyle Shanahan. And I was telling him how lucky you guys are to have Kyle Shanahan. And this year, I think Niner fans have figured it out a little bit more how lucky they are to have Shanahan. You don't have your quarterback. You don't have a bunch of your star defensive players. And you're still competing for a Super Bowl, right? And, I don't think this is going to be one of those type of moves where the Raiders are going to say, hey, Klint Kubiak misses the playoffs under a rookie quarterback. Klint Kubiak doesn't have a good defensive coordinator. Maybe they only win 8 games and they miss the playoffs. I don't think this is going to be one of those situations. The Indianapolis Colts kept Shane Steichen around because they knew he was a good coach. The Panthers kept Dave Canales around because they knew he was a good coach. And, 1 or 2 bad years, year 3, year 4, with these teams are in the playoffs. So I think for the Raiders, it'll be a similar type of situation. We will see, though, right? We'll see what ends up happening as we kind of go forward. Personally, I'm excited as hell for this because I really thought we were going to end up with Jesse Minter, which I don't hate, but I just think offensive coordinator matters more. X Willis, a shout out to you for becoming a member. You wrote a message saying amazing news. Now, what coaches come with him? That'll be the interesting part, man. Which coaches end up coming with Klint Kubiak? It'll also be interesting to see which guys we end up keeping, right? Like, do the Raiders keep Robbie Leonard, right? Or is he going to end up going to the Steelers with Patrick Graham? I don't even know which guys are still technically under contract. So I think that's kind of where it'll start. Hopefully Rob Leonard is retained because he's a really good defensive line coach. But I'm sure Klint Kubiak is going to want his own guys, especially as our defensive coordinator. And that DC might want his own guys that understand how he runs defense. So, I don't even care who stays. I don't even care at this point who stays or not, right? I'm just excited that we landed Klint Kubiak. Yeah, it'll be interesting, man. It'll definitely be interesting. A Seattle Raiders fan, 9788, shout out to you, says, I'm not saying we have more talent than the Seahawks do offensively because the Seahawks also have an amazing defense. But their offense and defense play complementary to each other. And this is definitely true. People bash Patrick Graham and say he's a terrible coach for the Raiders. But the thing is our offense has consistently been a, bottom 2 or 3 offense in the NFL every year. No coach is going to have success when your offense is that bad, right? On the defensive side specifically. So Patrick Graham struggling isn't because he's a bad coach, it's because on the offensive side it's that bad. Now, to your point, I do, do the Seahawks have more offensive talent? It's debatable, right? It is definitely debatable. Uh, they had Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's a great wide receiver. He's a top 5 wide receiver, but we have Brock Bowers, who's a top 5 tight end. Uh, the Seahawks have 2 running backs, but we also have Ashton Jeanty, and I know we have one, they have 2, but we have Jeanty as well. The Seahawks invested a first-round pick in a left guard in Gray Zabel, who I think is a good offensive lineman, but he was a rookie this past season. Their center is an undrafted free agent, Jalen Sundle, who they picked up. I think this is his second season. Their right guard, people make fun of that guy, right? Anthony Bradford. Their left tackle, right tackle are solid, right? I think their right tackle is better than their left tackle. Abe Lucas, to me, a really, really good tackle, but I think Colt Miller is better than both of those guys, right? Now, I'm not saying we're better on the defensive side. I don't think we are, but I think their scheme on the defensive side is also really, really, really good. The Seahawks, do they even have a superstar player on that side? I don't know, right? They have some good players. We'll see if the Raiders kind of build this up, man. The Seahawks are probably a better team than the Raiders overall right now. They have more depth. But I think coaching also plays a huge factor into this. The Raiders won 3 games. We had the worst coaching staff in the NFL this past season. I think the Raiders could have won 7 or 8 games if we had Ben Johnson this year or in a better coaching staff, right? Given we lost to like the Bears and the Broncos once, a couple other teams come, Jags. We lost to these teams by like combined 6 points, right? A couple other comments want to get into 10 Commandments. Shout out to you. Said, now that we got Kubiak and about to go get a new defensive coordinator, should we trade Crosby for picks? I don't think this makes sense, man. If the Raiders want to win the Super Bowl, you got to keep your best and most talented players at this point. If you want to win a Super Bowl, there's no way you trade guys like Maxx Crosby. Now, can Maxx Crosby net you 2 or 3 first-round picks, and could those be used to potentially get, something else? It's possible, but there's also a chance you never get a player as good as Maxx Crosby with those picks. There's also a chance, you trade those picks and you end up getting Damon Arnett and Tyree Wilson in return, right? So, it's not guaranteed that you're going to hit with first-round picks. That too, the truth is also this, the best teams in the NFL draft guys in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th round, and these guys fit the scheme well. They're productive. They play a role, and they make a difference for a defense. So, the Raiders need to focus in on that, right? They need to focus in on, you keep Maxx because he's a guy that's going to get double teamed on every play. Hopefully you're able to bring back Malcolm Koonce, another guy that can win, right, in a one-on-one situation. And then you just got to draft well, right? You just got to get players that can win in one-on-one situations. And you got to get guys that can, on the defensive side, fit the scheme. You look at the Seattle Seahawks defense is just a great example to use. The Seahawks don't have elite talent on that defensive side, right? They have DeMarcus Lawrence, who was like the 4th best defensive lineman last year for the Cowboys. They have Byron Murphy, who was a first-round pick, but like he's not an elite pass rusher. They have Drake Thomas, who was an undrafted free agent. The Raiders released this guy, right? And he's their starting linebacker at this point. They traded for their other linebacker. I forget the guy's name, but they traded, I think, like a 5th-round pick for him 2 years ago. The Seahawks don't have elite talent on that side, but they have some good players and they have guys that fit the scheme, right? So the Raiders are going to have to find some guys that'll fit the scheme, essentially, right? Klint Kubiak will 100% be calling plays. That's not even a question. The guy's going to come over. He's going to install his offense. And hopefully we see that wide zone action. Hopefully we see, that play action off that wide zone. And hopefully the Raiders, man, if you're drafting for fantasy football, man, Ashton Jeanty is going to be a guy to have, man. Kubiak runs a really good unit on the offensive side in terms of like the run game. YOV, Yov, I don't even know how to say her name. Klint Kubiak comes from Kyle Shanahan vibes. I'm hoping our offense can finally be explosive. Who from our O-line do you see taking a big jump with this coaching? I think 2 guys are going to end up being really good for the Raiders this year. Jackson Powers-Johnson on one end, as well as Charles Grant. I think Charles Grant ends up starting this year for the Raiders at right tackle. To me, I think Charles Grant showed enough against the Chiefs in that last game that I have 100% confident that this guy's going to be the Raiders tackle going into this next season and potentially even for the long run. And then I think JPJ goes back to center. Uh, I hope. I'm not 100% sure, right? Jalen Sundle, who's the Seahawks starting center, he's on the smaller side. So, he's fast and he's quick. He's smaller. So I'm not sure if Klint Kubiak prefers that or if that was just the Seahawks didn't really have any other options at center. And with that, I hope the Raiders end up getting JPJ back at center. But I think those two guys end up taking a big jump because I think Klint Kubiak, as you said, gives you Kyle Shanahan vibes. The offense is very similar to Kyle Shanahan, right? Klint Kubiak's offense is very similar to Kyle Shanahan. A lot of this is going to be, we're gonna run wide zone concepts, and then you're also going to see a lot of Yankee concepts, right? It's going to be a post with the crossing route. You're going to see a lot of crossing routes. You're going to see a lot of guys essentially get schemed wide open as well. I think the Raiders are going to have a lot of success this season, and as we kind of go forward, JPJ to me and Charles Grant, and I haven't made a Charles Grant film breakdown after the season ended, right? That final game. I will at some point, as maybe as training camp approaches at this point. But I think Charles Grant's going to become really, really, really good, right? He showed so much potential in that game against the Chiefs. I think he's gonna be really good. So we'll do that film breakdown at some point. If the Raiders can bring over Raheem Morris, man, that would be really, 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 really good. I believe Raheem Morris and Klint Kubiak spent time together at some point. Don't quote me. I don't know if Klint Kubiak was part of that Redskins 2013-14 coaching staff. I know Raheem Morris was. I know Kyle Shanahan was there at that point as well. Sean McVay, all those guys were over there. McDaniel, the LaFleurs. I don't know if Klint Kubiak was there at that point as well. This was back in 2013, 2014. But if we could bring over Raheem Morris, the guy's a really, 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 really good coach, right? So we'll see. Who is my top DC pick? I think Jim Schwartz is a really good defensive coordinator. Obviously, Raheem Morris is a really good defensive coordinator as well. If I'm the Raiders, I am looking to potentially bring over a defensive coordinator who's had experience in the past as a defensive coordinator. He's had experience as a head coach. Maybe he's gotten fired as a head coach. I'm bringing over that type of coach, right? I think for the Raiders, this is going to be the best thing they can do because Klint Kubiak is a first-time head coach, and for him to be able to kind of get that type of help from a defensive coordinator that already knows how to kind of run a team and keep him on, that guy will do everything on the defensive side at that point. I think that'll be a benefit for a guy like Klint Kubiak. I've heard a lot of people talk about Klint Kubiak that he's not a huge talker, right? He's not one of those guys. Which, maybe that's just because he was never really the head coach. I don't know. But it will be interesting to see who the Raiders hire as their defensive coordinator because you look at the Bears as a great example. I don't think the Bears would have made the playoffs this past season if Dennis Allen was not their defensive coordinator. Dennis Allen produced 34 turnovers. So in perspective, the Raiders produced 18 turnovers this past season, or maybe it was 17. So the Bears produced twice as many turnovers as the Raiders, essentially. What that means is the Raiders, if Dennis Allen was our coach, we'd have had one more turnover in every single game. The Raiders would have won 10 games if we had one more turnover in every single game, right? So that's kind of what Dennis Allen was able to do for the Bears. So I think the DC pick is huge, right? If the Raiders get a good DC, it's going to really, really, really put us forward. If not, we'll see. All right, we'll see what happens. I think the DC pick will matter a lot, but the good thing for the Raiders is once you have Klint Kubiak locked in, you can swap your DC in 2 years if it's not a good DC. And then you can swap your DC again in 2 years after that, right? And if it's not good at all, you can swap them a year after, right? The Niners literally did that where I forget who it was they hired last year. It was a 1-year DC. I think it was a former player. He was not good. They quickly got rid of him. They brought in Robert Saleh this past season, right? Is this true? Just joined the live. I'm pretty sure it's true, man. Adam Schefter put it out there. Ian Rappaport, Jordan Schultz, all the big guys, man, have essentially put it in. So I think it's as true as it's going to be at this point, right? John Rodriguez, shout out to you. Said, will Klint Kubiak bring his own brother Clay Kubiak? I don't think so. For Klint Kubiak, this doesn't make sense. He's already with the 49ers. He's probably only going to be there for one more year. I think next year, Klint Kubiak becomes an offensive coordinator where he calls plays. So right now, Klint Kubiak does not call plays, and it doesn't make sense for him to go and coach with his brother for 1 year and then try becoming that OC. It just makes sense for him to stay with the 49ers as opposed to saying, hey, I'm going to move to Vegas for 1 year and then have to move once again. I don't think it makes sense at all, to be honest. I think Klint Kubiak would bring over his own offensive coordinator. It'll probably be someone the Seahawks have right now on their coaching staff. They'll probably bring someone over. Maybe it's a pass game coordinator. Maybe it's an O-line coach. Who knows, right? Who knows what it is? Wide receivers coach. We will see. All right, we will see. Crob, shout out to you. Said, let's go, Sanjit. You're gonna start breaking down Seahawks film for us to see how their offense correlates to our players. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I'll probably do this tomorrow. I'll probably do it tomorrow. I'll probably have it released tomorrow. We'll probably just look at a bunch of like Seahawks plays, a lot of the explosive plays specifically. And you guys are gonna see like the blocking, like one of the big issues with the Raiders this past season, and I know you guys know this for a fact. 'Cause I know a lot of you guys watch tape. I know a lot of you guys have just seen clips, right? The Raiders would run like pin pull to the left, and the pin would miss the block, or they wouldn't know who to pin. The pull wouldn't know who to get to. They wouldn't know the rules. And then on the backside, the reach blocks wouldn't get to their guys. And then our pin pull concept just loses the yard, right? Ashton gets hit in the back or whatever. That's not going to happen anymore, right? Klint Kubiak's going to make sure these guys understand the assignment and they're on the same page. Everybody knows exactly who to block. The rules will be very, very clear as well. Our offense is going to be so much better as we go forward. And yeah, I'm excited, man. I'm super, super, super excited. Rampage says Rashid Shaheed is a undrafted free agent, not undrafted, is an unrestricted free agent. Um, yeah, I mean, look, we're gonna have some Seahawks guys come over this season. I don't know if it's gonna be Shaheed. I wouldn't mind Shaheed. I think Shaheed's a really, really good football player. He's with the Saints, obviously. Last year, Klint Kubiak got to see him up close, and he wanted this guy, right? And he was able to kind of bring him over. And think about this. This guy wanted Shaheed, and Shaheed came over from the Saints to the Seahawks. He's had a lot of success with the Seahawks in that time frame. He's kind of been there. And if he's an unrestricted free agent, he can go anywhere he wants, which means he can potentially come to the Raiders, right? If Klint Kubiak had that much faith in Shaheed, there's a chance he can come over to the Raiders, right? So we'll see if he ends up coming over. But I do think this year we're going to have some guys coming over. And also, I think there's a real chance we're going to see Trey Tucker take off this season, right? Trey Tucker is a really, really, really good football player, and he just hasn't had a good coach that could really utilize him to his strengths. Devontae Adams talked about this recently where he says he thinks Trey Tucker is going to be really, really, really good. And this could be it, right? If they end up getting Klint Kubiak to actually come over, which it does look like that's what's kind of happening. And then on top of that, you bring in guys like Shaheed or some other guys, right? Maybe get a true wide receiver one. It could just work perfectly for the Raiders, right? You get a true number one wide receiver, and Trey Tucker's that number two guy. You kind of build that around Brock Bowers and Ashton Jeanty. I could see Trey Tucker going off, man. We saw Jackson Smith and Jigba obviously break out under Klint Kubiak. It's gonna happen, man. Something tells me it's gonna end up happening. Derek Sharp says solid hire, but we're a long way away from winning the division. It's an interesting point, but the thing is I don't think teams are that far away, that different from one another in the NFL. Last year, if you guys told me the Denver Broncos are going to end up winning and getting the number one seed, or I believe they're the number one seed, if you told me the Denver Broncos are going to get that, or maybe they're a number two seed, if you told me that that's where the Denver Broncos are going to finish and they're going to win the first place in the AFC West, I would have said there's just no way. They're not a good football team, or they're not good enough, right? It's going to be the Chargers, it's going to be the Chiefs. Then the Raiders and Broncos will kind of be competing against one another. The thing is if Patrick Mahomes, and it does seem like this is what's going to happen, Patrick Mahomes is going to miss some games going into next season, right? If he misses some games, I could see the Raiders winning the division. But even if you don't win the division, right, winning the division is not guaranteed that the winner of the division wins the Super Bowl, right? You can still be the number two seed in the division, win 9-10 games, and you can still potentially win, right? So yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying, right? We're still far away from saying like this is a Super Bowl roster, right? We're not at that point right now. But the good thing is the Raiders have over 100 million in free cap space. They have the number one overall pick. They have a bunch of they have a bunch of picks that they can make in the top like 105 picks, and they have 4 or 5 in the top 105. So the Raiders are gonna get better, man. They're definitely gonna get better. Um, so yeah, well, it'll be interesting, man. It really will be. I'm excited as hell. Kyle Shanahan said that Klint Kubiak is not leaving, and no lateral move. So this just makes sense. I know, not everybody follows other teams like that, but like I think I've seen this as well. But I think just logically, it doesn't make sense. All right, Klint Kubiak, it wouldn't make sense for him to leave for a lateral position, right? He's moving his entire family, he's packing up, and he's going. I get it, it's with his brother, but Klint Kubiak's not looking to coach with his brother for the rest of his life. He's looking to follow his brother's footsteps and be a head coach in 3-4 years. So I think eventually that'll happen for him as well. Ten Commandments said, could you see Derek Carr returning to the roster or being an addition to the coaching staff? I don't think Derek Carr's coming back to the roster. I'd be shocked, to be honest with you. Um, could he come back to the coaching staff? Maybe, but I'm not sure if he wants to be a coach at this point. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if he's put it out there that he wants to be a coach or not. Um, I'm not 100% sure if he even has that mindset of being a coach. And I know Derek Carr is doing like his podcasts and those type of things. It'd be cool if he wants to coach, of course, that'd be cool. But I don't know. I don't know 100% if he's going to. JT Douglas, shout out to you, said, what up? What up? I just got to the party. Is this true? If so, Kubiak likes Geno Smith. So where does that put us? I'm not sure. Does Klint Kubiak actually like Geno Smith? I don't know. I really don't know, right? Because technically, Klint Kubiak got to the Seahawks and they shipped away Geno Smith. And they obviously brought in Sam Darnold. And the thing is, Sam Darnold's on this side of the spectrum. Geno Smith's on this side, right? They're different. They're different quarterbacks. Geno Smith doesn't have great ball placement. It's not that accurate. Uh, he's a guy that wants to push the ball downfield. He wants to throw the ball deep. He wants those 50-50 balls. Sam Darnold's different. Sam Darnold plays between structure. He'll put the ball, if it's a 4-yard pass, and that's what the coach is telling him, that's what he'll do, right? Sam Darnold's closer to like Derek Carr. And I think Klint Kubiak would much rather have, if you look at our current quarterbacks, you got Aiden O'Connell, you got Kenny Pickett, you have Geno Smith. I don't know if Aiden O'Connell's under contract this year. He might be a free agent. But, I think Klint Kubiak would like Aiden O'Connell more than the other two guys, to be honest, because Aiden O'Connell plays much more within the script of the offense. But I also think Aiden O'Connell has some limitations. So I think Kubiak is more likely to just draft Fernando Mendoza. I think that's just kind of what makes the most sense. Shout out to you, JT, but it definitely does look like this is what it's going to be for the Raiders. Um, yeah, I'm excited, man. I can't tell you guys how much this move actually means for the Raiders, because this actually puts us in a position where, going forward, we're always going to have an opportunity. As long as the general manager does his job, we're always going to have an opportunity to win and to succeed. And to find a good defensive coordinator is a lot easier than to find, a top 5 offensive coordinator. I think finding that defensive coordinator that's solid it's easier, right? And I think for the Raiders, if you get a quarterback that's consistent, you see, you get a wide receiver one, Charles Grant ends up being good. You're on a really, really, really good path based off of the guys we already have right now on this offense. And then on the other side of this, on the defensive side, if you hire a good coach, right, if you hire a good scheme, a guy that knows how to run defenses, Raheem Morris as a great example, if you're able to bring in one of these guys that can kind of do that, for the Raiders, that puts you in a position where, you can now build around a coach and you have a bunch of picks. You have a bunch of cap space. One of the things people don't think about with the Seahawks is the Seahawks went out and just brought in absolutely ton of veteran defensive players. And those veterans are actually finding success for the Seahawks because, Mike McDonald wants to run this advanced scheme with all these different rules and all these different things. And usually younger players struggle at these things. So DeMarcus Lawrence comes over. They traded for a linebacker. Again, I forget the guy's name. He was a veteran. I think he's like 28, 29 at this point. He's their starting linebacker. You go out and you bring in Leonard Williams. You go out and you bring in I forget the other guy's name as well. Um, they have a bunch of guys, right, that are like veterans that these guys are essentially adding to that defense. The Raiders can do that. We have all this cap space available as well. So hopefully the Raiders are able to make this work. Um, so yeah, we'll see. Now we'll see what ends up happening. I am very excited. Again, I think the Raiders, they're going to be on a good path at this point, right? Let's get into some more of your guys' comments. We got this one coming in by Ruben Rust. Shout out to you, man. You said Andrew Janoko will be a good quarterback coach for Mendoza. He's been with Kubiak in Minnesota, New Orleans, and now with the Seahawks. He worked with Cousins, Carr, Darnold, and Mendoza is comparable to them. It could be better. Shout out to you, man. I had no idea who this guy is, but I'm gonna take your word for that, man. If he's been with Kubiak in Minnesota, in New Orleans, now with the Seahawks, and he's worked with Cousins and Carr and Darnold and Mendoza, is obviously comparable to those guys, which I 100% agree with, right? Fernando Mendoza is much closer to Sam Darnold, Derek Carr, and Kirk Cousins than he is to Geno Smith, obviously, right? This makes sense. And, don't overlook this. The Raiders wanted to bring in Davis Webb because Davis Webb gets a ton of credit for developing Bo Nix. Davis Webb gets he gets the most credit. He gets more credit than Sean Payton gets, at least in the eyes of like the scouts and general managers and those people out there. Because of the fact that Davis Webb developed Bo Nix and made him into kind of the quarterback he was this past season, the Raiders apparently wanted him. They were willing to hire Jesse Minter as their defensive coordinator or as their head coach, right? And he runs the defense. And they were willing to go with Davis Webb as their offense coordinator. So, and then they were going to draft Fernando Mendoza. The Raiders were cool with that. So now they're bringing in Klint Kubiak. Can Klint Kubiak develop quarterbacks? That's to be seen yet, right? The Raiders may feel like he can't. So bringing in guys like Andrew Janoko, and I'm probably saying the name wrong, that's going to be a key part of Fernando Mendoza working out. The offensive scheme and the design is one aspect of it, but developing him and the mindset and, being able to read coverages in the NFL, things are faster. That's going to be the other side of this. And, I'm not a quarterback guru or anything like that. I don't know how good Fernando Mendoza is going to be, but like, can you guys just imagine if the Raiders get the next Patrick Mahomes, right? Again, I don't know if that's going to be him, but like, even when Patrick Mahomes came out, they weren't saying he's the next Patrick Mahomes, right? They were saying that, yeah, he's whatever. He's like a third quarterback taken in the draft. And imagine if Fernando Mendoza is like that good, right? And then Klint Kubiak ends up being what we think he is. Shout out to you, Ruben, for the $20 super chat. I think the quarterback coach is going to be so important for developmental purposes. Cage asks a phenomenal question here. Is Caleb Rogers the answer at guard? I am not sold on Caleb Rogers, right? And I say this because, and again, he was a rookie, so maybe he develops and he gets a lot better. I feel like there's so many guards you can draft every year that are bullies, that can move people, that can bully people. And I don't know why the Raiders don't do this, man. Caleb Rogers could be good for all we know, but Caleb Rogers is not a bully, right? Jackson Powers Johnson's the bully, right? Jackson Powers Johnson, it does not matter who that defense lineman is. He has the power, he has the strength to move that guy, right? Caleb Rogers has not shown to me that he has that in his game, right? And DJ Glaze might, and this is why I think for the Raiders, I want to see DJ Glaze get an opportunity at guard because DJ Glaze has some bully in him right now. He's not an actual bully, like where he basically beats people up, but he's strong as hell, right? And I know we put him at right tackle, but I'm pretty sure Tom Telesco drafted him to be a guard. And yeah, we had a need at right tackle, so he ended up going over there. But I'm pretty sure Telesco drafted Glaze to be a guard. So if I'm the Raiders, I am having Caleb Rogers and DJ Glaze battle it out for that guard position. Anthony Belton is a great example of a guy who's a bully. He started for the Seahawks, not the entire season because the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers have a ton of good offensive linemen. They have like 8 guys on their offensive linemen that start. They just rotate these guys. And Anthony Belton's one of the guys, and he played right guard for the Packers this past season. I really, really, really wanted the Raiders to get Anthony Belton. I think Belton's one of those bully type of guys. And I'll be honest, I haven't really focused too much on the draft this year, the draft cycle. I'll probably start getting into that in the next 2 weeks. But the Raiders got to get bullies. And it's easy to find these guys. You just got to put the investments in. We'll see. We'll see if Caleb Rogers is the guy. I'm not 100% sold on Caleb Rogers. I am on the other side sold on on Charles Grant, right? Charles Grant, I think is really good. I value him up here. Caleb Rogers, I'm still kind of iffy on. I'm not 100% sure if he's the guy or not. Rogers only started one game for the Raiders. He had elite upside, man. He showed elite flashes from a movement perspective, from his run blocking. Like the guy looked really good. The movement elite, and he's strong as well, right? So we'll see. We'll see what happens with these guys. I'm obviously higher on Grant at this point right now, and we'll see the development of both of those guys going into next season. The DeBrome, I think that's the Debrom. Shout out to you for the $5 super chat. The football gods are finally granting the Raiders some grace. Man, that puts a smile on my face. I'm not gonna lie to you, man. How long has it been since the Raiders have gotten lucky? You just go back, right? Just think about this. How lucky are the Los Angeles Rams that they got Sean McVay? How lucky are even the Chiefs? They got Andy Reid, right? Reid was a really good coach, and the Eagles kind of move on. How good or how lucky are the Niners, right, for landing Kyle Shanahan? The Bears last year, how lucky are you for landing Ben Johnson? It's different when you hire Pete Carroll versus Ben Johnson. They're two different types of hires. The Raiders got lucky, man. The football gods are looking down on the Raiders right now, and they're saying we're gonna give you guys a little luck here, right? So I'm excited, man. I'm really, really, really excited just to kind of see how this works out for the Raiders. Something tells me it'll end up working out. Jack Cannon 916, shout out to you. When did you graduate high school? My wife is also a honker. You, but it's such a small town in the day. I graduated in 2011. I think 2011 was the year I graduated. So crazy. It's been 15 years since I graduated high school. Wild to kind of think that. Shout out to you, man. Appreciate the comment. Shout out to you, man. Yeah, Raiders, man. We absolutely got it. I'm excited, man. I'm really, really, really excited to kind of see how this works out for the Raiders. I think it does. I really do think it works out. S.187. A guard Texas DJ Campbell is a bully, and Miami's Anise Cooper. Let me screenshot this real quick. I'm gonna check them out right after this gets posted, and we'll see if these guys are those type of players. We need bullies, man. We definitely need some bullies at the guard position. You get Colt Miller at the left tackle position. You add a bully on the inside, right? Like you already have JPJ, who's a bully. You add another bully, left guard, right guard, wherever, and then the other left guard or right guard position. I think DJ Glaze as well as the combination of Caleb Rogers, one of these guys ends up winning that job. And I think Charles Grant holds down to the right tackle position. I think you have a really good offensive line right there. Right. And keep in mind, Klint Kubiak came over to the Seahawks last year and they drafted a guard in that first round. So I know the Raiders don't have another first round pick after we take that quarterback, but I think, pick 36 in the second round, right? Or 36th overall pick when it was like pick 3 or 4 in the second round. This could work out really well for the Raiders, right? Shout out to Sanjit from Germany. Klint Kubiak fires. Shout out to you, man. Appreciate you. Tuning in all the way from Germany. Jack Kenna said, I like Charles Grant limited play. Agree, 100% agree with you on that. Boost in with the 5355. Let's trust Clint and what they do with Jackson Powers Jones. And I agree with you on that. Let's trust this and let's see what ends up happening. I have faith that Klint Kubiak's going to be able to figure it out. If he thinks JPJ should be a guard, leave him at guard. Right, that gives you one bully at guard. But then that also means you got to figure out the center position. And maybe it's Caleb Rogers goes to center. Who knows, right? Who knows what could happen if Klint Kubiak wants a center that's fast and that's quick. One of the things we have to realize is when you run wide zone concepts, one of the important parts of that is your center has to be able to reach. Now, I think JPJ is fast enough and he's smart, and I think he's done a pretty good job being able to reach and get up to that level. So I don't see that being an issue for him. But I think he'll figure this out. DJ Glaze allowed 10 sacks. The thing we have to realize is DJ Glaze played right tackle, which is different than playing guard. Right, as a tackle, you're playing out in space. Way different, much harder. As a guard, usually, there's a 50-50 chance you're going to get double teamed. You're going to get double team help if you're a guard, right, by the center. So it's different when you play guard versus tackle. Yes, DJ Glaze gave up 10 sacks. If you guys remember, I told you DJ Glaze was not that good. I literally told you guys this before the start of the season. People did this with Thayer Munford the year before. They crowned Thayer Munford as a franchise guy. People did the same thing with DJ Glaze. they just weren't that good, right? They really just weren't that good. I'm not surprised DJ Glaze gave up 10 sacks. But with that, I think DJ Glaze has potential as a guard, right? So I would give him that opportunity as a guard. And I'm also telling guys this before. I think Charles Grant has it, right? I think he has it. So we will see if that ends up happening. Um, I think he definitely has it, but we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. Ruben Ross, what is your thoughts on coaches viewing Jack Sparrow Johnson as a guard due to his injury history? Quarterback and center chemistry is extremely important. I agree with you, man. You know, one of the big issues that I saw with the Raiders this season was I felt like the center got swapped out 3 different times. Right, you went from JPJ early on in camp to Jordan Meredith to at some point Alex Kappa. And I believe we had another guy play center. Don't quote me, but we may have had a fourth guy in there as well at some point. Um, I agree with the thought process, right? If JPJ is going to get hurt and he's inconsistent with the health perspective, then putting him in that center could be a risk because usually, you know, you go into a season with 5 guys that are going to start, and usually you'll have at least a third guard option, right? But your backup center is not going to be as good. So, you know, I think for the Raiders, this is something you're going to have to consider. But also keep this in mind. Center is a lot easier to replace than guard. I think center is the easiest position to replace, to be honest. The Raiders could probably just bring in a UDFA from last year, from this year. Guys will be cut, released. Center is a really easy position to be able to kind of fit a guy and a guy to just kind of end up playing, right? You don't even have to be that good to be a center. As long as you can snap the ball, you're smart, you can read the defense. You can pretty much play center in the NFL, assuming you're an NFL caliber player, right? Like I'm not going to play center in the NFL, right? Um, yeah, but I agree with you on that. I think if JPJ is viewed as a guard, it makes sense. You know, you can factor in the injury aspect. Um, so yeah, we'll see. Obviously, I think our offensive line coach is definitely going to be super important as well. This is something we're going to have to figure out. I know some people have said Carmen Brasillo is a guy that could come back to the Raiders. He's been with the Giants for the past 2 years. Now it's kind of interesting because, uh, you know, when Carmen Brasillo was here with the Raiders, I had some current offensive linemen at that time with the Raiders that bashed Brasillo as a coach. They said he was inexperienced, he was not good, and I always kind of just thought, okay, maybe this guy's not that good of an offensive line coach. But the Raiders' offensive line was probably better, or at least it performed better under Brasillo than it was the past 2 years. And Brasillo, on the other side, went to the Giants, and they had a pretty good offensive line the past 2 years. So, you know, honestly, I think Bill Callahan would be the best hire if it's possible to bring him over. I think that'd be a phenomenal hire. Probably is not going to happen though, but I think the O-line coach is going to be very, very, very important. If the Raiders can get their coaching staff right, you know, like for example, Rob Leonard, you know, I can guarantee guys like 99.9% of the millions of fans that don't watch the Raiders, right? Like the Niner fans, the Seahawk fans, these guys have no clue who Rob Leonard is. They have no clue that a guy like Clavon Chason, right? Like Chason had so much success with the Patriots, even go to the Patriots. 99.9% of Patriots fans don't realize that Rob Leonard was the reason why Chason broke out. Right, Chason was phenomenal under Rob Leonard, and Rob Leonard kind of just got the best out of him. And you know, that's kind of where, you know, people don't realize how important your coach is. And I think a lot of us Raider fans saw it this past season as well, how bad our offense line coach was. So I think we kind of felt that a little bit. Um, so yeah, it'll be interesting, right? It'll be really interesting. I think the coaching staff's gonna be very, very, very important. Can the Raiders bring Olu from the Hawks to play center? That's a great question. Oluwatimi came out of Michigan, I think 2 years ago, and I think this is his third season. And he was supposed to actually be the starting center for the Hawks this season. And I believe he got hurt, or he may just have lost the job to Jalen Sundell altogether. Uh, I wouldn't mind bringing him in, but you also have to factor in, you know, if he was a good center, he would have already started for the Seahawks. Again, I don't know if it was an injury or something else, but the fact that he hasn't won that job also makes you think, like, does it make sense to potentially bring him in, right? I don't know. It's definitely an interesting question. We'll see what ends up happening. I'm going to get into a couple more of these comments. We're going to end the video here. My camera's going to cut out at some point here as well. Omar said, Sanji, I'm not a fan of Kubiak. These fans and some YouTubers pushed him, then we'll want him fired 1 year in LOL. Also, how we get clap downs, we need a D tackle. How do we get Caleb Downs, we need a defense tackle. So, first of all, I'm going to be honest with you guys, man. I do not agree with hiring a coach and firing a coach if the coach is a good coach, right? If he's proven to be a good coach. So, like AP, for example, did not like the hiring, right? He was not a proven coach. It didn't really make sense. He didn't call plays on either side of the football. Uh, Pete Carroll. Yes, Pete Carroll won. He had the Super Bowl ring. But if you look at the ring, he had Robert Saleh and Dan Quinn helping him, which allowed the defense to be the most dominant defense we've ever seen. And he's never been able to replicate it. Pete Carroll's always just kind of struggled being able to actually win. So that hire was kind of a iffy hire as well, right? It wasn't guaranteed to work out, and it didn't work out for the Raiders. Klint Kubiak's a different type of hire, right? Uh, for us YouTubers that have pushed this, there's a reason why we pushed Klint Kubiak, because we saw what Ben Johnson did. We saw it, right? We saw Ben Johnson go from the Detroit Lions, just going back, and I'll just quickly tell this story again because there's almost 2,000 of you guys. Some of you guys may not have heard the story. There was a time when Ben Johnson was a tight ends coach for the Detroit Lions. The Lions had Anthony Lynn as their offense coordinator. Anthony Lynn won like one game, right, in his first year under Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell was kind of on the hot seat a little bit, and he decided, I'm going to keep Anthony Lynn going into the second season. So they go into year two. Dan Quinn, Anthony Lynn, Detroit Lions suck once again. 7 games left. The Lions, Dan Campbell's about to get fired. He ends up making a last-ditch effort, fires Anthony Lynn, promotes Ben Johnson to the offense coordinator. I think they win 4 games of the last 6, 7 games. They kind of go on a run a little bit, buys him 1 more year. Ben Johnson becomes the offensive coordinator. They make the playoffs. For 3 straight years, the Lions are the best offense in all of football. And that was under Ben Johnson, right? That was partly because of Ben Johnson. Now, Ben Johnson leaves. What happens to the Lions? They fall off, right? They don't make the playoffs the year Ben Johnson leaves. On the other side, the Bears, who haven't made the playoffs in years, they end up making it into the playoffs, which, you can just follow that story and recognize that Ben Johnson's an elite coach, but this applies to other elite coaches. This applies to Kyle Shanahan. This applies to Sean McVay. This applies to Andy Reid. This applies to Klint Kubiak. Klint Kubiak goes to the Saints. If you guys look at the Saints when Derek Carr was healthy, they put up 500 yards a game. They put up like 60 points against the Dallas Cowboys defense. Keep in mind, that was the year that Dan Quinn was part of the Cowboys, right? I believe he was part of the Cowboys. Don't quote me on that, actually. The Dallas Cowboys get blown out. I forget what other teams. They get blown out, right? I think Klint Kubiak's going to end up working out, but we'll see. I'm definitely not going to be pushing for Klint to get fired after 2 years. I'm pretty sure, the tape will also kind of back it up. Matt, thoughts on the next defensive coordinator? I hope you're doing well. I appreciate it. I hope you're doing well as well. Raheem Morris would be my pick. Vance Joseph, I think, is already a defensive coordinator, so that probably won't make sense. Raheem Morris is my pick, man. If we bring him in, we're gonna make the playoffs this year, man. Even with the rookie quarterback, we're gonna be in the playoffs. Jim Schwartz is another guy to keep in mind. I think Schwartz is still technically with the Browns. I don't know if he's actually said I no longer want to be with the Browns. But those are my 2 guys right now. I'll come up with the list today or tomorrow at some point. Hey, Sanjit, what's going on with Kubiak? He's our coach, man. Or at least I think that's, unless there's another update, which I haven't seen, where he backed out in the last hour. But yeah, he's definitely going to be the Raiders coach at this point, based off of what we're kind of seeing. I think Klint Kubiak is the best guy that's coming from that Kyle Shanahan tree, right? I think he's the best coach coming out from that tree. Senior Michael, shout out to you, Sid. Have you watched any Jennings Dunker tape? I like him to compete with Grant at right tackle and let the others be the swing with the glaze at guard. The thing is if you're going to get Dunker, there's a chance he's the first-round pick. I watched his tape really, really, really early on in the process, and I watched the Senior Bowl tape. Obviously, looked really good. I think the Senior Bowl game, was it yesterday or was it today? I haven't even paid attention, to be honest. But I watched the tape this past week. I think he's good. He looks good, but we'll have to go back and really focus in on him and kind of see what he looks like from over the course of the season. But let's also not overlook that he's probably a first-round pick, right? So yeah, I don't think the Raiders are going to end up landing him. Now, the Raiders could draft another tackle if they want, but I think it'd be a waste of a pick. I think Charles Grant should be the guy. Yeah, again, I think the Raiders are going to end up being really, 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 really solid this season, and I'm excited, man. Obviously, you know, over 2,000 you guys tuned in here. We've been just kind of talking and kind of going back. Um, so yeah, man, I'm excited. I hope you guys all have a great Sunday. Enjoy the rest of your guys' Sunday. We'll obviously, get into some tape probably tomorrow. We'll watch some of what this guy does. Obviously, it's the biggest story on social media right now, and enjoy it, man. I'm telling you guys, the Raiders are gonna start winning. We'll be in the playoffs. I think within the next 2 seasons, we'll be in the Super Bowl. Hopefully, in the next 10 years, maybe we'll win a Super Bowl. Hopefully, in my 30s, right? It's 8 years left. Hopefully, in my 30s, we get to win a Super Bowl, man. So we'll see what ends up happening. Shout out to all you guys that tuned in. Appreciate it. Hope you guys all have a great Sunday.